This good.
Jim, are you on?
No.
I am on.
Okay. We have everybody here.
Less speakers and more.
I have 8:30. Are you ready?
You're ready.
It's like we're looking at the black screen.
Call the meeting to order. Sarah, would you please call the roll?
Yep. For the record, the State Highway Commission is assembled at NDOT headquarters located at 1500 Highway 2 here in Lincoln, Nebraska. The date is Friday, January 21st, and the time is 8:30 a.m. There is a copy of the Open Meetings Act in the room. Commissioner Koppel.
Here.
Commissioner Fagerland.
Here.
Commissioner Gertis.
Here.
Commissioner Hawks.
Here.
Commissioner Kindig.
Here.
Commissioner Leetree.
Here.
Commissioner Wolford.
Here.
All right. Informed.
Next item on the agenda is minutes of the December 10th meeting.
I would make a motion that the minutes from the December 10th Highway Commission meeting be approved. Second.
Okay.
Koppel.
Yes.
Fagerland.
Yes.
Gertis.
Yes.
Hawks.
Yes.
Kindig.
Yes.
Leaf Green.
Yes.
And Wolford.
Yes.
Approved.
Okay. Don't believe we have any introductions or announcements this morning. So we'll move right into the director's remarks.
All right. Thank you, commissioners, and it's a pleasure being here. And I've heard in looking at meetings, the best way to start them out is to start with some good news. So I'll do that. There's a few pieces of good news that we have. Number one is traffic fatalities. Nebraska, we should feel good about bucking the trend in terms of traffic fatalities. We had approximately a 2% decrease last year, and I think looking over 2 years, about a 19% decrease, whereas the rest of the nation is looking at a 10% increase. And Federal Highway and USDOT are extremely concerned about the trend of where that's going. So I think us as Nebraskans, we should feel good, but yet we can't rest on our laurels, and we'll continue with Buckle Up, Phone Down, and other initiatives in which to hopefully continue that trend out there. Another one I know internally we've been working on is Highway 1 in Murray, in which I don't know if any of you have received any calls, but that bridge project there over the railroad has taken some time to get done, plus we've had some issues with flooding that also put a damper on trying to get that project completed. I believe it was earlier this month, we've got both lanes open on the bridge, so I think the community is very happy now. And hopefully the inconvenience will be forgotten very quickly here out there. So I think that's a great thing too, that we're able to get that project substantially completed. And one last thing, winter driving, usually we don't think that is good news, but you know, this has been a mild winter so far, at least in my perspective. So I think we're fortunate. I just heard on the weather that they're expecting it to be dry throughout the end of January. Now that's good for driving, maybe not for agriculture, but and I just want to just reiterate the tools that we have as an agency with our 511 and making sure that we all utilize 511 and prepare for winter driving and make sure that we've got adequate supplies in our vehicle just in case something unintended happens as we're traveling out there. We've got a pretty good agenda here. Eric is going to be later talking about the legislative session. It's been pretty active. For me, it's my first one, at least in the start. I got in the tail end when I was appointed last year. And it seems like there's a lot of interest when there seems to be money available, either through ARPA and the Egypt bill out there. So we're finding tension out there in terms of the involvement on the political side, in terms of projects or how the agency should be functioning. I think there's always that tension where I think as an agency, we should be, in a sense, a neutral party looking at the statewide needs, whereas representatives are strongly trying to be an advocate for their regions. And I think that tension's a good thing, but I think Eric will show probably in some of the legislation that's being proposed what we're working on, and I think you'll find that interesting. With the new infrastructure bill, while there is significant funding, it's maybe not as much as people envision or what they believe the agency got. And I think what we're dealing with as an agency is appetite. I've told people in my prior career in Iowa and even here that actually as an agency, when we get a funding bill that increases appropriation, our job becomes tougher, and it's people's desires of what they want to get done. We've been having meetings and we'll be having meetings with different advocacy groups on their desires, and myself just roughly adding up the numbers, I'm seeing easily just with these groups about another $2 billion worth of wants based on already what we have out there. So it's an interesting time, and there's a lot of paradigms of thought that just continue out there, such as we all know, build it and they will come. I think it's much more complex now than it was in the past. I believe that probably is very true 70 years ago. Today, there's many other synergies that need to occur to really make the desires or the impact of transportation meet the desires of the region. Some of the areas that we're looking at talking is we have an afternoon meeting with a group looking at Highway 35. And I believe about a decade ago, there was some work done looking at making that a 4-lane corridor. And with that, I think Eric
fight back then.
Well, and then there's still that desire, but then there's legislation now being proposed looking at 81 and 20. And so those aren't necessarily complementary in terms of wanting a 4-lane expressway on those. So interesting times, but I think that's why we're all in transportation and trying to hopefully make the best decisions for the citizens of the state. And those are my comments.
When you say $2 billion in wants, is that projects that are on the radar already that they want moved up, or is a lot of this some?
No, these are new that aren't on the books.
These are things that are coming up that just say, hey, okay.
John, when you talk about safety, I read a deal the other day that said, I think Nebraska, Wyoming, and South Dakota were ranked in the bottom as far as their safety, as far as seatbelt use and some other things, somebody ranking us. Did you happen to read that article, anybody? And
I don't know if I saw that article. Yeah, our seatbelt usage is in the low 80s, I think.
But it wasn't just seatbelt, it was in how we promote safety, and I couldn't, I wish I'd have picked up the article, but it didn't give us a very good light as far as how we're dealing with safety issues, so nobody else saw that. Okay.
Well, there's different reports out there.
Where did you read it? Trade publication or?
No, it was online. It was, well, I wish I'd have kept that. So it was a safety group that ranks states, and it was, I think, in our local paper, Star Herald. That
Well, we could look into it and see
Yeah.
whether.
and I mean, one of the things that it mentioned was seatbelt use, but it also talked about other, and it didn't specifically get into it about how we, and this was a national safety group that, and it named the 3 states, Wyoming, South Dakota, and Nebraska, as being 3 of the lowest in the United States.
Yeah, there's different groups, and whether they take that from the Reason Foundation or others looking at that, I think in one area we get dinged on, and we actually had a great improvement was pedestrian fatalities, and we're all probably seeing on the news in Omaha where they seem to be having several recently out there. So other aspects, they just look at the legislation that's on the books in terms of, one that's been an issue for some is whether it's a secondary or primary in terms of seatbelt usage. And so they'll look at that as if you don't have that, you'll be dinged if it's not a primary.
Well, that was one of the things they did
Right.
talk about, the primary use not being a violation, or so.
And they'll look at, graduated driver's licensing, so they'll have a whole slew of things in terms of trying to come up with their metric in comparing states.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay, thank you, John. Next item on the agenda is election of the 2022 Commission Chair and Vice Chair. When I look at the rotation, it's Commissioner Gertis for the chair and Commissioner Leekring for the vice chair. If we follow the rotation. Open the floor to nomination.
So moved.
Okay. Moved in second for Commissioner Gertis to be the 2022 chair and Commissioner Leekring the vice chair. Call the roll, please.
And you. All right, Commissioner Koppel,
Yes.
Fagerland,
Yes.
Curtis,
Yes.
Cox,
Yes.
Kindig,
Yes.
Steve Green,
Yes.
and Wolford.
Yes.
All right, I'll get that updated. Curtis, chair, Steve Green, vice chair.
Legislative update. Eric Strack.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Nice to see everybody. It's been a while for me, and nice to hear everybody who's not able to be in attendance. You have a handout here. I'm just gonna kind of go through some stuff. These are bills that were introduced this year. There were several bills. That's right. That's right. There were several bills that carried over from last year that are still alive, but generally, a lot of these carryover bills are just kind of neglected. They didn't get through, so they move on. But today, they're in session. This is the 11th day of a 60-day session, so this is considered the short session. But they did introduce, and yesterday was the last day of bill introduction. They did happen to introduce 580 some bills for the short session. So there was no shortage of ideas. And what you have in front of you are some bills that I thought I handpicked that I thought would be of some interest to the Highway Commission. So we'll just go through them quickly. You'll notice there are notes below each bill's data. You can go through those on your own time if you want. I'm just going to make some quick comments for each and then I'll let you guys answer some questions. So LB 747, the first bill on the list. This bill was introduced back when the Department of Aeronautics and Department of Roads merged. One of the provisions that were thrown into the bill was to require require the Director of Aeronautics, when a new one is hired, to be confirmed by the legislature. This is kind of a little carrot thrown to the aviation community just to let them know that, the legislature is still paying attention, and to make sure that the aviation community doesn't feel like aeronautics is going to become a side note, a side thing. So this bill would eliminate that requirement that the Director of Aeronautics be confirmed by the legislature. It wasn't put out by us. It was just something that was a bill that was introduced. We're not going to probably testify on it, really. We're just going to kind of monitor it to see where it goes. And I don't think it's going to be a big priority for any senator in the legislature, but it's, again, things can take a turn quickly, so we keep an eye on it. Next bill, 875. This bill would rename the director. Currently in statute, the director is referred to as Director-State Engineer -hyphen, and this bill would change that to the Director of Transportation for the Department of Transportation. So for some reason, make it a little longer title. Again, this is not a bill that we requested. It was just one senator's idea, and like the first bill, we're going to just kind of monitor it. We're not going to testify on it, and we'll see where it goes.
You really don't have an organization made up of engineers and don't have an opinion on that?
Well, we kind of have an opinion.
Oh, we have a lot of.
We kind of have an opinion, but ultimately, we've had discussions. We've had personal discussions with the inviting senator or the introducing senator, and have just made our opinion. We've made our opinions known. So we're going to monitor it. We're just not going to testify on it.
Your opinion is that
You want my opinion,
what's
or his opinion, or his opinion, because there are a lot of different opinions.
there was discussion several years ago on hiring a director for the Department of Roads at the time, whether there need to be an engineer.
Statutorily, they do not need to be an engineer.
And I guess I'm of the opinion they should be. As an engineer, I'm going to stand up and say that. And I think this is an organization of engineers, and I think we need to have an engineer at the top of the head.
That
And I
opinion
think
was
that
made
should
known.
be this. Okay, it was made known.
It was
Thank
made
you.
known.
As an engineer on the commission, I'm going to stand up and say that.
And I appreciate that, and I think some others in the room appreciate that also. But ultimately, it's probably not a priority bill. So, we're not going to make a big deal out of it. It's kind of like poking a bear. We're not going to do that. So I'll move on to LB 913. This is a bill that was introduced by Senator Bosselman out of Wahoo. This bill would require the department to take responsibility for certain county road approaches, which it's the county road, but it's on state right of way. And so there's always been a kind of a butting of heads between the counties and the department as to whose responsibility that is, since it's on the state's right of way. And this bill would add some clarification, a little bit as to when it is the department's responsibility.
Can you give us a factual situation where this would have been?
I can. There's one specific instance that Senator Bosselman is interested in, and this is up in Schuyler. 2019 floods washed out this part of this county road, and actually washed out part of our damaged our highway. So our crews went in, fixed the highway, and fixed that approach, because that's what we do when we're in the area. We generally try to help out the county forces when we can. And then something else happened. Was it another flood?
Yeah, 2 weeks later.
2 weeks later, another flood kind of damaged that approach. And so there was some discussion as to, was it our responsibility since we rebuilt it and it was on our right of way, or it's the county road? It's county jurisdiction. Statute has been interpreted by the Attorney General. We have an Attorney General's opinion, at least, that the county, it's a county road. They're responsible for their road. We permit them to be on our right of way, but it's their road. And so there's always been some dissension there This is just trying to give a little bit of clarification.
Is it an issue that arises frequently, or is this?
No, I don't think it arises that much.
They just basically want to cover that situation, that if we build it through a catastrophic flood or something and it washed away, we would build it again. I don't expect it to happen hardly at all, but it's just one constituent has gone to the senator, they
Okay.
want to cover that piece.
Okay, I'm just curious the history behind it.
It's not a frequent thing.
All right, thank you.
Yes, I've had, the county commissioner of Johnson County approached me concerning the right-of-way between Highway 50 and the county roads. Sometimes a rainstorm or whatever will happen and damage. It'll run off the highway, but sometimes it bothers me, or it needs repaired for the county road. And they were trying to figure out, who's responsible for that situation. And they pointed out several instances.
It's been a long known issue, and again, we have tried to do our best to work. If we're in the area, we fix it. But ultimately, statute has been interpreted that it's a county facility. So we do our best to try to compromise. Again, this bill is adding a little bit of clarification.
I think that's important. I think often that becomes the problem, is it's not clear who's supposed to be doing what.
Understood, yeah. All right, I'll move on to LB 991. The one-liner pretty much says it all. Appropriate funds of the Department of Transportation to conduct a feasibility study for high-speed commuter rail. This bill would appropriate $500,000 to the department to conduct a study for high-speed rail between Lincoln and Omaha. These studies have been proposed before as early as last year. Actually, only last year's was only appropriating $100,000 to the department, which would not have provided a very good study. But in the notes real quick, in 99.9 we did a study, and the study found that the cost per rider for the commuter rail portion, even when combined with express bus service, would have made the commuter rail option unfeasible. I can't remember exactly what the price per commuter would have been, but it was a lot more than it would have cost you to drive. So, but ultimately, if the legislature appropriates the money and asks us to perform the study, we'll do it and see how that comes out. 1999, what are we talking, 21 years ago, 22 years ago, or 23 years ago? I'm not good at math. I'm terrible at math. So we'll see what's changed. Yeah, that is if the bill passes. LB 999, require the Department of Transportation to apply for federal funds and construct a bridge. This is the brainchild of Senator Wayne up in North Omaha, and what he is asking the department to do with this bill is apply for a federal grant, discretionary grant, and for a specific project, and if awarded, then we will construct that project. There are some issues we have with the bill. We're going to likely testify in opposition to the bill, just on the grounds that, first of all, that's not how applying for a discretionary grant works. There's a lot of, there needs to be a little bit of an education there. And so I think we may take that opportunity to work with the senator to let him know that this is actually how the process works. And I'll have some other comments at the end of this as I go through here. But LB 1016, LB 1016, provide for public-private partnerships under the Transportation Innovation Act. This is something that we have long sought, is to be able to work with a private sector, create some joint groups to do some projects. And Senator Walz specifically introduced this bill to kind of give us that option. Although she's focused mainly on 275. You'll recall last year, Senator Walz introduced a bill to allow the department to bond, and her purpose for that bill was to try to speed up the expressway, mainly 275. And John and the governor did some roundtables over the summer to kind of illustrate that just dumping a bunch of money into the fund doesn't mean a project can go faster. Although it may shorten the project. It's not gonna make it start faster. There are all these steps that the senators were unaware of. And so basically what Walls has done in this case has kind of stepped away from the funding part and said, okay, what tools can I offer the department to help them,
Expedite the
yeah,
process.
basically, yeah, to help them get these projects either done faster or started faster. At least she did come to us prior to introducing this bill and gave us a heads up, which we really appreciate when senators do that. 1257, appropriate funds to the Department of Transportation for grants for electric or direct current fast charging stations. This bill was just introduced yesterday, and I've just briefly scanned it, but what it wants to do is appropriate $10 million of federal funds from ARPA, the COVID relief bill, to coordinate and administer a grant program for the installation of these fast charging stations. Not quite sure how to feel about this bill yet, because the new federal bill, the reauthorization bill, has $30 million for electric vehicle charging, something like that. So there's already going to be money available for that kind of thing. So we'll review the bill and decide on a course of action at a later date. And the last bill on your list, 1274, require the Department of Transportation to plan, design, and purchase rights of way for U.S. Highway 81 and Nebraska Highway 20. And as Director Selmers stated in his comments, this is one of those sort of, I think the non-technical term is pet project, that Senator Flood and a few of these other senators are interested in turning a U.S. or state highway into a 4-lane facility from U.S. 81 to the Iowa border to kind of give a east-west connection to Iowa. North of the interstate, and we'll see how that plays out. Again, this bill was introduced yesterday, so we're still in the review phase. That is all I have on the list for now. I guess, any questions? Yeah.
Highway 81, isn't that a north-south road?
Highway 81 is north-south, yes. The other component of that bill, 1274, would be to then turn Highway 20, which is north of Norfolk, I believe, from 81 to the Iowa border, probably I-29, into 4 lanes. So 81, yes, there's a portion of 81 that is still 2 lanes.
It's 24 miles from the 4-lane up to, from like the 2081 intersection
Okay.
to Norfolk. So
Okay.
you're probably talking about 18 to 20 miles of 4-lane on 81, and 20 would be from it's about 4 miles west of Randolph,
Okay.
up through Laurel, and then through Jackson, which has a 4-lane component to it.
So I think this also talks about it going all the way to Yankton, though, so it's more of a T.
Okay,
Yeah.
I haven't read, obviously,
Yeah.
it's
And-
legislation, but.
Yeah, and I'm still reviewing it, but I mean, as you know, Highway 20 is not a component of the original expressway system, so this is brand new, request. So,
This is about 110 miles total,
Total?
based on, it's all the way, the 55 miles all the way to the Iowa border, and roughly 60 or 58 or so all the way to.
Up to the Yankton, South Dakota, the river border.
Yep.
So Highway 81 is 4-lane through Kansas, but not necessarily 4-lane all the way through Nebraska, correct?
correct, it's 4-lane from the border, it's the Nebraska portion, 4-lane from the border to a little bit north of York, and then it goes to 2-lane until it gets a little bit south of Columbus. It's 4-lane to Norfolk, and then, and then there's 2-lane from Norfolk north, right? Yeah.
I think the thought on that was to have a 4-lane that runs north-south from Texas all the way to.
Yeah, it's called the Meridian Highway, is that what it's called?
Canada.
This is Pan American.
Or Pan American?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Commissioner Fagerlin, Commissioner Kindig, do you guys have any comments?
No.
And I'll just say that, to tail on one more comment that Director Selmer made in his remarks. So we have probably about 15 or so senators who are term limited, and a lot of them are they're gonna be out after this session. They're looking to, get some stuff in. Some of it's legacy, some of it's just, things they've been mulling over for 7 years, and this is their last session, so they thought they'd throw it in the hopper. So next year, we probably will have about 15 or so new senators. So it's kind of an exciting end of an era, so to speak. So this is I believe this is the third crop of senators that will have been term limited since term limits came in. So third large crop. So lots to study. Thank you very much. My client's not guilty.
Okay. Review of the highway naming policy. Say, I don't think this is Dan that's doing it.
Yeah, so your agenda says Dan Waddle. I'm not Dan Waddle. Dan's out today, so I'm covering for him. So my name is Matt Neiman. I'm the traffic control engineer for the department. I've been with the department for 26 years or so, but I've been traffic engineering for, I don't know, the last 15 or so. So we'll talk about our naming policy, kind of where it started, in the order since it came through. So first thing is to remind you about what the purpose is. So in the policy it says, purpose of naming a segment on a highway or a bridge is to bring to public attention and recognize officially a person, organization, or other entity who has contributed significantly to the well-being of others. So that's why this policy exists. That's why we install signs along there. This is why we do that. Our history with it. So our first named highway that we have is the Grand Army of the Republic Highway, which was named in 1947. I assume on the heels of World War II. And we have 6 names prior to 1987. 1987 is what we found is the first record that we have of a policy. What existed before that, I don't know. But that's our first record of what that is. So we have 6 names prior to there. You'll see through this that there are items, or there are names through here that have been grandfathered because of when they're introduced and changes that came after. So this exists in our world as an operating instruction. We have several revisions starting in 1987 with the first one that we found. Then 1988, 1990, 94, 96, and then it slows down a little bit when you get into the 2000s, and our last update was in October of 2020. You also see, if you go through the order of when these highways were named, there were a lot that were named in the 90s, early 90s. There are a lot of names that came through, so that is a reason for some of the changes that we have.
Right, jumped ahead.
Okay, so August of 1987, this required. The request must be by a written resolution from a local governmental entity. This was then referred to the Highway Commission for your review and approval. The commission recommends the name to the director, state engineer, and the governor, and the final approvals by the governor. Those things still exist now, except for the written resolution from the local governmental agency. It can come from a private group. It does not have to come from a governmental agency. Also with this, the department would provide the signs for these routes. Typically one at each end of the route. If there's other ones, then whoever the requester was, they would have to fund those. And then memorial names would not be allowed on the interstate system. Then in February of 88, change made was now names requested must be of statewide importance or significance. This still exists today. Changed a little bit, but still exists. The policy does not infringe upon local agencies to name or rename their streets. So there were some communities who thought, okay, if you name this Cornhusker Highway was one. Cornhusker Highway does not need to be named Cornhusker Highway once you get out to Waverly. If you have a memorial named street that goes through a community, you don't need to change the name of the street in your town because of this memorial name. So it just clarified that. Okay. And then January of 1990, the policy changed to now the requester must fund the signs. It limited it to only 2 signs and 1 per direction. So this was a major change that we made in October of 2020 to allow more than 1 sign, because the one that was approved there was Highway 20 along the north part of the state, and we had 420 miles or something like that from one border to the other. And they said, well, what happens if you come on in the middle? You don't know. So that was a change there. If you look at our most recent one, 2 signs are around $500 for the sign fabrication and the installation. And so it's not a burdensome expense for somebody who's requested this. 1994, the name must be of substantial importance or significance. The statewide portion of that was removed. The name of a bridge across the state border requires the approval of both states. We have 2 of those now, one with South Dakota, one with Iowa. And then acknowledge the interstate routes named as the Dwight D. Eisenhower System of Interstate and Defense Highways. This name was created with federal legislation in 1990. Prior to this, 480 in Omaha was named the Gerald Ford Freeway in 1982. So here's one of the grandfathered routes that we have. And so if you'll see along the interstate, we don't have a green sign. This is the sign that that was designed for the interstate system. You'll see them around the nation, and here in Nebraska also. In September of 1996, the policy was revised to say we will not place directional signs on other highways to direct traffic to the named highway. We'll just put it on that highway. One of the issues that we deal with a lot is that we have a lot of signs out there. My guess is this was in an effort to just minimize the number of signs that we have at highway junctions where you come up to here. And being a memorial name, nobody's using it for route guidance. And so the need to place something on another highway just isn't there. March of 2000, there was a lot of changes. So individual interchanges may not be named. We have one interchange up in South Sioux City that was named previously. Rest areas are not eligible for naming. They already have an official name, so they weren't eligible. Only Missouri River border crossing bridges are eligible. So we have 15 Missouri River bridges. There are 2 other privately owned ones, but there's 15 that are on a highway. The 2 bridges that are previously named are the Purple Heart Bridge, which is 108th Street over I-80 in Omaha. And then Carl Timmerman Memorial Bridge, which is on Highway 32 in Cumming County. And you see those in 1995 and 1996 that those were named. So again, 2 more grandfathered names. No more than 1 name per major highway segment, as determined by the Highway Commission and the director. We have a couple, as you'll see later, that are 2 Highway 83 statewide has 2 different names. Those were prior to March of 2000. So from this point on, no more than 1 name per segment. And then limit of 1 named highway or bridge per person, organization, or entity. Purple Heart Bridge. We have Highway 34 is Purple Heart Highway also. So there's 2 names again that were grandfathered in. So this just limits that from going on in the future. There was also an effort to name I-80 through the state as the Purple Heart Highway also, which is why if you go to the rest areas, you'll see a Purple Heart sign at the rest areas. That's how we handled that request. We put a sign up there at the rest areas, but no other naming for the same organization. And then the evaluation criteria changed. So an individual needs to be deceased 5 years to be considered. You'll see in 1984, Highway 81 or 281 was named Tom Osborne Expressway. And so, now you need to be deceased 5 years to be considered. You need to meet one of the following: either born in Nebraska, lived a significant portion of your life here, and made a contribution to society that was affected by the residents in Nebraska. This was a substantial, significant contribution, and also gave consideration for fields of public affairs, art, sciences, professions, second to entertainment, athletics, and kindred fields. And then more weight was given to activities that added to the welfare of the state. So kind of giving criteria of maybe who, if it's a person, who could be eligible for this recognition. And then beginning July 1st of 2000, the Highway Commission will select not more than one name for signing. This is still on there today. The application is due on September 1st, and then there's an October presentation to the Commission, just as we do now. The evaluation criteria that was on the page before was taken from the criteria for the Nebraska Hall of Fame Commission for eligibility in the Hall of Fame. So if you look at the statutes, the busts that are in the Capitol, the same criteria was listed for those. And I think one main thing was, instead of being deceased 5 years like our policy says, I believe for that one it's 35 years, or at least it was at the time. You had to be deceased 35 years to be considered for that. January 2009, the request to name a state highway segment must be supported by resolution from the city or county the segment would occupy. So if you have a statewide effort, you need to get a resolution from every city and every county that would go through. There's some effect of going through a community, going through a county. It's good to have their support when you go through, to make sure that they agree with the naming. And then in October of 2020, a couple changes. So a lot of overlapping segments of highway with statewide named highways. So the Nebraska Medal of Honor Highway is on Highway 20 across the state. There's also a Crazy Horse Highway that's up in the Shadron Crawford area. So it allowed for that overlap. It's really hard if you have a statewide naming to not, especially on one of the routes that would be considered for a statewide naming, to not have some other segment in there. So this allowed for that. This Nebraska Medal of Honor Highway, as you remember, was part of a nationwide effort to do this. And so really would look bad on us if we said no, because, well, hey, there's already this 20-mile segment that's already named. For routes designated that are statewide or span multiple counties, the sponsoring organization may request the installation of additional signs. These additional signs are limited to no more than one sign per direction in each county. And this is really so, like this one, for instance, if you have 420 miles or so, it allows that name to be placed in the middle. And then still reserves the right that we have final approval and the number and location of any additional signs. So if there's a place where we say, hey, that just doesn't work because there's too much other stuff going on, we can push it out, or we can say, no, we'll put it in a different place. So by the numbers, we have 41 named highways or bridges on the state highway system, 41 with the latest one, assuming that will be approved by the governor. 6 routes that span the entire state from border to border. Like I said earlier, US 83 has 2 designated names. We have 2 non-interstate Missouri River bridges that are named. 8 highways that span 2 or more counties, and 25 that do not extend beyond one county. And then this map just kind of shows the ones that extend statewide It's not all encompassing of everyone that's there, but ones that extend statewide or extend beyond more than one county. Any questions?
This was a request from the last meeting to have brought up. So let me unmute and Dick and Fagerland. Do either of you guys have any comments or questions?
Sarah, you ask. Oh, go ahead, Jerome.
Sorry to interrupt you, Doug, but I do have a couple of questions I'd still like clarified. And the first one is on number 2 under request, no more than one major or one name per major highway. And if I understand that right, going on down to the subtopic below it, it says that the Highway Commission and the governor have the authority to override that particular bullet point. Is that correct?
Correct.
Matt said correct.
So if I understand the process right, the board or the commission approves each request or disapproves, whichever, but if they approve a request, are we duplicating ourselves there?
I'm not following.
Well, the commission always would provide the recommendation. I mean, the ultimate approval still has to be the governor. I mean, that's how in every action that we have is the statute written. So this would be no different, I would presume.
Okay. Then the second issue I have is under number 3A, a person shall have been deceased 5 years to be considered. And I guess I'm just, in my mind, I'm saying is 5 years, has this individual or this entity really met the test of time? And if I heard right, we have taken this from the Nebraska Hall of Fame. We're duplicating that time limit. Is that correct?
No, I don't know how the Nebraska Hall of Fame reads now, but how it did read back when that language was added to the policy, it said 35 years. And so it apparently was the thought at that time that 35 years was too long, and it was added at 5 years. And why 5 years, I don't know.
And was this the commission that set that time, or is that?
Correct. Yes.
The commission set it at 5 years.
Yep.
I think there's 2 Hall of Fames there. I remember us talking about it back when we did that. There's one to get a bust in the Capitol, but there's a Nebraska Hall of Fame that it was just 5 years that you're just listed somewhere. And that's what we were representing at that time, that it was 5 years. And that was where it came from, is what I remember.
The Nebraska Hall of Fame, to get a bust in the Capitol is 35 years.
Right, to get a bust in the Capitol, but just be listed on their records.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
The part we had in our file talked about the bust.
The bust.
So, and everything was essentially word for word. You know, the language that we have in here was essentially word for word, except for the 5 or 35. That was looked like the only change.
Well, and, all of these are memorial highways, so the idea is a person needs to be deceased. So that's always been the idea, is to memorialize somebody. And
Well,
you've
the
got
Osborne Expressway is not a memorial.
No, I understand.
That was before.
That was grandfathered, before we made these changes.
Can I ask a more general question?
Yeah.
The policy that you're describing and the evolution of this is just a policy within the Nebraska Department of Transportation. It's
Correct.
not by statute.
Nope.
The statute doesn't say you have to do this.
Nope.
This is just something that has evolved over time and can be amended in the event the commission deems it appropriate to amend.
Correct.
But I think, David, the reason that all of this was put together is that, as Matt talked about, in the 90s, there were this influx of all kinds, and we were starting to get 4, 5, 6 requests per year. And really not a lot of guidance, so that's why we really tried to define this and limit the number too.
And my recollection was we had 2 or 3 applications a couple of years ago, and this issue kind of surfaced at that time.
Since we put the policy in place, there's been a lot of years we've had none.
Yeah.
A couple of years we've had one.
And then that one year we had like 2 or 3, wasn't it?
And yeah. And before the policy was put in place, I think we also felt we were getting some frivolous, some applications that really weren't appropriate for a state highway naming. And that's why the 5-year deceased was put in. And
Well, and also the language in there about fallen heroes, because we were getting some of those where people wanted to honor some soldier that only the people in that community would know anything about. And so we placed that language in there also that, I mean, you think of all of the fallen heroes, we don't have enough roads to name everybody.
Right.
So.
Well, but let's remember, I mean, the reason we brought this just to describe the history is really more of a vehicle or platform for you to discuss the very tough issue that you battled with. 2 applicants, 2 worthies, and we have one criteria that says you select one. And there were some debates about the calendar, December versus the next year and all that. So this is really our attempt to say, here's the policy, here's the history of the changes, and have that conversation. So we can say, this is the policy, and with your help say, this is what we're gonna execute and run with it. Or this is an opportunity to debate that criteria to say if there's anything that we need to change. Again, to Commissioner Koppel, this is internal policies, more guidance, so we can know how to operate and what to present to the commission and create that information as we present that.
And my recollection was the issue was, can you have more than one be approved in a single year? And since that time, have we had any applications?
we have the one, just here this last fall.
But we just had one.
Just one.
Correct.
And
The issue went away because you only had one.
And we haven't had any, we haven't had any others.
In 2020, there was 4 applicants. You chose one, and that's where I think the question came up, was why are we only picking one? But we pushed the criteria, or the policy that this is why we're only choosing one. But since then, we've only had 1 applicant per year.
And I believe in 2020, a couple of those other ones may have been repeats from years prior, not the year prior, but several years prior.
Yes, so it wasn't just the amount that you can, it wasn't just we were only gonna choose 1 per year, but there was also, those applicants weren't fitting any of the other criteria as well.
I can remember at least one time when we've had more than 1 applicant, and we chose one and told the others that, this one is probably viable, bring it back next year, and it did come back, and they were named the next year. But as I said, in 2000, when we did this, we were getting 6 and 7. And it seems like there's one year we named 3 or 4. And the department came to us and said, this is gonna get out of hand real quickly if we keep doing this. So we're just getting too many names. And so we needed to slow down. And that was the reason. It needed to be slowed down a little bit, but still allow the opportunity for it to happen.
And the problem I have is that when somebody travels our state and they drive through a highway and they see a name there that nobody has any idea of who that person is that really memorializing? I'll give you an example. In our area, John McClellan expressway is only in our county. People in our area know who John McClellan was. Many of you may. He used to be the highway commissioner from here, but that would not meet the criteria now because he's not nationally recognized. And I'm glad we put that in because I think it should be something, where they are nationally recognized. I think that's the idea, so that somebody driving through our state would recognize that, or if they went and did a search, they'd find that was somebody that had national significance. So I think that's been a good change too.
Yeah, as I look at it, even the Hall of Fame, I think there's two parts, and I don't think it's really about necessarily memorializing the person. It's about celebrating our cultural heritage.
Yeah.
What did that do to the state? The individual had an impact, made us who we are, or it speaks of where we came from. Types of things. So I think what you have here. So I think some of the question here is: do we think there's a problem? Does there need to be further refinement to the existing policy or not? Or are we okay with it right now?
What?
Thank you for that history. It was very helpful to me. Go ahead.
Commissioner Kindig, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was going to comment just on one item here. 3A, where a person shall have been deceased 5 years to be considered. I'm not sure 5 years gives us a full legacy of what this individual contributed and how important it was to Nebraska. I really think that needs to be extended. And my personal opinion, it probably needs to be 10 years. But that's my thoughts and my idea, and I don't know what everybody else thinks about it, but I'm not sure 5 years does complete justice.
I think the program right now is, working just the way we thought it should. I mean, we had one in the last few years, and I think the ones we've honored have been appropriate, and I don't have any problem about the 5 years. I don't think there's a right number that you could come up with. So I think it's working fine.
Well, I agree. I think the one per year is a thing that we should continue. Like Chairman Wolford said, if you have two candidates that are worthy, one can resubmit the following year. And it's not like they never have the opportunity to apply again. I think that probably would be a good path to stay on, in my opinion.
And I agree with what Doug stated a few minutes ago. I think in the short time that I've been on the commission, I don't see a real problem with what we have today. And I think the 5 year thing, I understand what Commissioner Kindig said, because the longer you go, if that person is still remembered, that probably means something as far as what he meant or she meant to the state. But I don't know that there's really a right number, so you would hate to put yourself in a corner where you wouldn't be able to do that if that was choice. And the other thing is that each individual one is reviewed by the commission, is reviewed by the department, and then is sent to the governor. So I think there's a lot of checks and balances just in the process that this event goes through that the existing policy pretty much covers.
Is the chair looking for a motion, or?
If somebody wants to, let's read about, I think if we do want to change this, I think somebody needs to make a suggestion and then have us bring it, because this is a review on the agenda. So we would direct the department to come back next month, or I guess in March, with a specific change that you would want.
As an action item.
As an action item. And I think we could, if somebody feels strongly enough that we need to change this, then I'm comfortable enough just saying it. Let's just tell us what you want changed, and we'll bring it back as a resolution, and we can vote on it at the meeting as an action item to actually change the policy.
Does the department itself have any position on the issue? That's what I want to know.
It's okay to have a position.
We don't have positions these days.
Well, I think we've illustrated, as you saw from Matt's presentation. I mean, we're always open, obviously, to changes. We need to make sure this policy is viable as we move forward. But from our perspective, we said that we think it's meaningful to a lot of people when I hear comments from them, because it's once, select one per year. So we elevated the significance of that. And I think the process has worked, like many of you said, and I believe, what we have in place is very, very good, and it has served us very well. And a change to, our intention was to make sure that it covers the conversation that you guys had in 2020. And I thought that we were going to repeat that conversation basically, in December. Well, it didn't materialize. So, we just need to put a closure to that topic. And from our perspective in the traffic division, I think what we got is viable and it's workable. And our position, frankly, is we just leave it as is.
Okay. Thank you.
I remember being a kind of contentious meeting.
Mm-hmm. So, well, I guess I'm looking around. I'm not seeing anybody standing up, and I don't hear Jerome or Jim standing up. So, having said that, we'll move on and put a closer to this. Okay? Next item on the agenda is MTIS update I believe we're going to be online with a presentation from Bill Welling.
Yeah, Bill is not able to be here in person, so let me pull up his.
Hear me all right?
Yes.
Hold on, let me get your-
Yes.
All right, Bill, yours is up.
Sir, do I have control of the presentation, or can you give me control of it?
Nope.
Hold on here. Let's see if I can, it doesn't look like it. So sorry, sir. I'll have to ask you to move things forward. I apologize. Good morning, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Bill Wheeling. I'm one of the assistant design engineers in Roadway Design Division. I oversee projects in District 2 and 5. Today, I'd like to give you an update on a recent public meeting we held in the neighborhoods up in Omaha in the area of two future potential projects, US 75 and F Street and 24th and I-80. And this meeting was held on January 5th. Next slide. Now, these potential projects were identified as part of the Metro Area Travel Improvement Study, or as we refer to it, MTIS. MTIS was a collaborative effort between NDOT and the Metropolitan Area Planning Agency, or MAPA. We also partnered with several stakeholder agencies as well. MTIS was a three-phase effort, and it began in September of 2013 and was completed in 2019. MTIS is a very high look at the metro transportation system needs and how they are linked with the needs of the MAPA region. The purpose of the study is to develop a comprehensive multimodal, multi-system plan, and also the identification of potential projects. Next slide, please. That evening, we went through the presentation twice, and between the first and second presentation, and then after the second presentation, we had various displays in the foyer with people at NDOT representatives at each display who could answer questions for those who attend and also listen to their concerns. You can see in the slide, Director Selmer kicked off the presentation welcoming everyone. He mentioned that local communities have been reaching out to us specifically about these two potential projects. He mentioned that these potential projects were based purely on operational issues, and what NDOT needed to understand is how the potential projects affect communities, and that was why we were holding the meeting. Director Salmer said that we were here to listen to their concerns because we don't live in this area and we need to understand how these potential projects affect them and their community as well. He ended the introduction letting them know that we're very early in our processes. We have not made any final decisions on either one of these two potential projects. Next slide. This is just a picture showing the attendance that we had at the first presentation. Overall, we had about 100 people attend both presentations. We were expecting a little bit more, but I think because January 5th was really cold, wind chills that day were below zero for the entire day, and so that might have affected the attendance that we had. Next slide, please. This is a slide I took from Channel 7 news website. As you can see, I just wanted to show you this was the foyer area that we had the display set up. You can see those in the background. We had NDOT representatives talking with those who attended and answering their questions. And so what I'd like to do now is just give you an overview of that presentation we did, and then just some information on how we believe it was received by the public. Next slide. Well, as I mentioned, EMTIS was a study that was conducted over 3 phases, and the first phase was the evaluation of existing and future no-blow conditions. The report generated out of this phase outlined the current state of the system, and then it also showed the performance of the system in the future if the system is left in its current state without any future maintenance or expansion. We not only looked at the elements shown on this slide, but we also reviewed studies and reports completed by stakeholder agencies, obtained a comprehensive list or set of transportation-related data, and we also conducted a survey in 2014 in the Omaha Council Bluffs area that asked about perceptions of transportation issues and needs, the severity of those transportation issues, and asked for their input for potential solutions. Next slide. Phase 2 is the strategy and alternative development and evaluation phase. In this phase, we examined those needs that we identified in phase 1 and evaluated them on a corridor level based off a number of strategies that we identified. And some of those strategies that were identified are shown on the slide here. We took that information and then we developed some regional strategy packages that we then presented to our stakeholder agencies and also the public as well, and asked for their input. Based on that feedback we received, we developed a final strategy package that was used in phase 3 of the study. Next slide. And phase 3 of the EMTIS is the Freeway System Vision and Implementation Plan. That phase took the final strategy package that we identified in phase 2 and identified potential projects for the freeway shown on the slide here. We also identified a potential timeline for construction for those potential projects. Potential projects identified were both system preservation and expansion projects. Next slide. Now, MAPA, as well as local agencies and other stakeholders, worked with NDOT to identify this list of potential projects. And you can see on the slide here some of the stakeholders that participate in that endeavor with us. It was input from these stakeholders was a necessity since interstate and freeway projects impact city and county streets, as well as city and county projects may have an impact on interstate and freeways. Phase 3 of EMTIS focused on potential interstate and freeway system projects. NDOT is responsible for the maintenance and development of these systems, as well as the state highway system. Next slide. We also shared with them our project delivery process timeline. Now, MTIS is the first of many steps in NDOT's path to take a potential project from concept to construction. And since our project delivery process does occur over several years, we do have opportunity for public input at key milestones within the process. Next slide. Then we talked about the potential projects we had in the area there. First one was US 75 potential project. That's just south of the I-80, 480 US 75 system interchange there. What we're proposing in this location is to replace the structures at Q, L, and F Street over US 75 and then permanently remove the structure on O Street over US 75. This would allow us to construct an additional lane both in the northbound and southbound direction along US 75. The Q Street and L Street interchanges are within close proximity of each other, and so we're also proposing that we would reconstruct these interchanges to combine the on and off ramps to improve traffic operations. Now, as I mentioned, we're proposing to replace the structure at F Street, and with that replacement, we're also proposing to close the ramps at the F Street interchange as well. Now, if we do proceed with the closure of those ramps at the F Street interchange, we will need to have an additional project along Dolman Avenue there, which is to the west of US 75. That additional project would be to increase the clearance below a railroad structure that is just south of F Street along Dolman Avenue. The reason we would need to do this project is for trucks that are that would need to get to US 75. With the F Street ramps closing, they would need to use Dolman Avenue to get to L Street and then over to the interchange at L Street to utilize US 75. Now, the current proposed implementation year for this project is 2032, so we have a few years before we would begin any design work on this project. Next slide. The other potential project we went over with them was the I-80 and 24th Street potential project. What we're looking at here is the proposed replacement of the structure on 24th Street over I-80, and then we would remove the on and off ramps at the 24th Street interchange. Typical widths for interstate shoulders are 12 foot both on the inside and outside. And currently in this location, we do not have that shoulder width any parts within this area. And so our proposal is to remove that 24th Street bridge and with new pier placements so that we would have that, we'd be able to attain that 12-foot inside and outside shoulder width, and then we would remove the on and off ramp at 24th Street interchange. The proposed implementation year for this project is 2042, so we do have a number of years before we would begin any design work on that potential project. Next slide. Now, we did go over a few MTIS projects that we're currently looking at moving forward with. And before I go over those, I just want to let you know that we are looking at moving forward with these projects, but it is dependent on funding availability, project delivery, and other factors if we do, or if we are able to move forward with these. So, Sarah, sorry, you're going to have to click on a few times to get each one. The first one there is I-480. No, that's okay. The first one is I-480, Woolworth to St. Mary's Avenue. That's replacing the bridges on Woolworth Avenue, Leavenworth Street, and St. Mary's that are over I-480. Go ahead and click. You got to click it twice, sorry. The next one there is the I-80 westbound, Q Street to Giles Road. This project is adding an additional lane westbound on I-80 from the ILQ-CD road to the Giles Road exit. Next one. Next project is the I-80 and 186th Street interchange. This is constructing an interchange south of Omaha at approximately 186th Street. This project is very early in the stages, so we don't have the exact location as of yet. Next one. Next, we have the Pacific to Dodge Street project. This project will add an additional lane on I-680 in the northbound and southbound direction along 680 from Pacific Street to Dodge Street. Next one. And then we have the N50 Ramp Project. This project is adding an additional lane also in the westbound direction on I-80 from Giles Road to the N50 or 144th Street exit ramp. Next one. And the final emphasis project that we communicated to them was 50th Street to I-480. This project will replace the pavement on I-80 in both the eastbound and westbound direction from 50th Street to the I-80 480 US 75 system interchange. And we are also going to add a lane in both the eastbound and westbound direction along I-80. Now, with the addition of that lane in the eastbound and westbound direction, we will also need to reconfigure the 42nd Street interchange. Next slide. We also want to inform them of some system preservation projects and also a B&A project that are scheduled to go on within this area. The first project that I want to mention is the southbound US 75 Chandler Road to I-480 project. This is a resurfacing project. It's in the southbound direction only from Chandler Road to I-480. This project has been let, and tentative construction start is the spring of this year, 2022. The next project is northbound US 75 Q Street to F Street. This is a maintenance resurfacing project. It's in the northbound direction only from Q to F Street, and it is tentatively scheduled to be let in August of 2022. Next slide. Next system preservation project we mentioned was the I-80 480 US 75 bridge painting. This project is to paint bridge girders within the system interchange there, and its tentative letting date is August of 2023. Final project we informed them of is a Build Nebraska Act project. That's Chandler Road to F Street in Omaha. This project would add an additional lane in the northbound direction from Chandler Road to F Street. And it would also replace the structure in the northbound direction that is over J Street in this stretch. Now, this project was listed as an expansion project in the MTIS final report, but it is noted that it is a B&A project and funded by the Build Nebraska Act as well. Next slide. So that concludes my overview of our presentation that we gave. Some feedback that we received. We did receive some positive feedback on what we presented. There were some people that felt that what we were doing was positive in that, but overall, there was a lot of concern about the proposed projects, and especially the closures of the F Street interchange on US 75 and the 24th Street ramps on I-80. And we did receive some suggestions too. There's a number of suggestions we received that we will look into and see if we could implement those. And the comment period closed yesterday, actually. And so our communication division, they'll compile those comments and also the notes that we took at the meeting as well, provide those to all of us, and we'll take a look at those and then determine our next steps from there. Next one. So that concludes my presentation. I'd like to thank you for letting me present this. I apologize for not being there in person, and thank you, Sarah, for running through the slides. And if you have any questions, I'll do my best to try to answer them now.
Okay. Question?
If I may, I'd like to add some comments to it. So it was shortly after I got appointed that I was contacted by a local representative of the community expressing concerns about what's proposed within the South Omaha area with the ramp closures. And because of that, that's why we had this meeting. We weren't required to have this meeting. We're very early in the process, but there was a lot of concern expressed by the community. And I think, if you look at the overall MTIS, at least in my view of it, this was an area where we weren't necessarily just purely adding capacity. We were taking away some aspect of access to a community. In South Omaha, you know, it is a community that probably has felt that they've been marginalized in the past in terms of the type of infrastructure improvements that are occurring there. You know, I think there's some concerns. We know Sarpy County is exploding to the south and all that we're seeing operational issues today that'll just get worse, especially around F Street, in terms of just the tightness and the closeness of different weaving motions and interchanges there. So I said, you know, we need to look at it, and I think even if you look at it nationally, where they're talking about reconnecting communities, making sure that infrastructure does not harm communities, especially those maybe lower on the social economic scale in terms of the rest of the state population. At least in my view, it appeared that we were going opposite of what the trend is. We were going to make now the community pay for maybe growth in more affluent areas, and you're not going to necessarily get the benefit. Now, that's not our perspective. What I shared is typically as we go in there and as engineers, we're trying to optimize cost and minimize footprint and things like that. And what I shared is, you know, that's how we go about doing that. And we can come up with what we think is an elegant engineering solution, but it doesn't work for the region or the local area. And that's why we want to continue speaking about this. Unfortunately, the person that was working with us did not attend the meeting, and I think there's still some confusion, at least on this individual's part. And multiple contacts on the political side, wanting to get the ombudsman, saying, I think there's still a feeling that because we closed the comment dates to January 20, that we're going to make a decision and we're just arbitrarily going to go, and that's not our intent. We will reach back out to the community with different options as to what we can do. Try to explain that there's always trade-offs on any solution. If we keep access, we might be taking property. We might be taking different viewscapes. It might change some other quality of life issue there. It's not just simple. You know, there's been some suggestions that we do something similar to the expressway at Dodge Street. And well, this is different. There's a lot of neighborhoods there. Do you want to see what some people might consider a monstrosity out your window or something like that? So trying just to give them a perspective that, yes, we want to hear your voice. You live here. You have to drive it every day. We want it to work for you as best as possible, too. So I think this is an interesting project. In my view, it's probably one of the more complex areas that we need to deal with in terms of impact to a community as to what we're doing out there, and it's worth our effort. And I actually think that's why, as engineers, that's why we're in the business. I like creative challenges or something that's difficult. I think we can rise up to that and hopefully satisfy the community and make them hopefully trust us a little bit more, feel good about the agency as we're working with them.
Is the local community generally receptive to the idea that there needs to be something done by way of improvement? The question is what?
Yeah, I think so. I think they know. I think there's some, in some cases, they're trying to minimize that because they're fearful of losing the ramps. But if any of you have driven through, you know, going on I-80 and taking 75 south, it is very tight in there, or you've got to make quick decisions, you can get trapped. But it is hard, you know, us trying to close that and divert everything through L Street. I've driven through L Street during peak hours. That's not a place you want to be either. So it's a difficult situation, and the community is really trying to revitalize their downtown. And so, you know, for me personally, I'd have a hard time strangling that or taking that off and saying, well, no, you can drive down to 13, take 10 to 15 intersections with lights to come back. Well, most people aren't gonna do that. So, you know, we've got to figure out something, but it's not gonna be an easy solution, in terms of how, hopefully we can come up with something that, works for the community too.
I would agree with you because I drive, often when I come to Omaha, that's the route that I take. And you get into that certain area, you really have to be on your game to be in the correct lane to either go east or west or north. And it's congested in there, and I'm surprised they don't have more accidents than they do.
Okay. Other comments, questions? Okay, we'll move on to public input. Any public input?
I just came to listen.
Do we have anybody online?
Nobody online
Okay,
that has requested it.
no remarks from the chair. So. Public meetings calendar.
Our next scheduled meeting is March 25th at 8:30 in South Sioux City. We're going to be at the Marriott South Sioux City Riverfront. So that's the next meeting that will take place.
Okay. Nothing further, we're adjourned.